Okay, thank you again, and we will move on. Chief, your chief's report on number 8.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I understand we're having some audio difficulties broadcasting over the web, so I wanted to let you know it's apparently being recorded okay, but the people watching via the web may not be able to hear.
Okay. All right, thank you.
That's unfortunate. Fire Chief's report for discussion only. Commissioner Hartung had asked me to investigate a response time complaint. There was a medical emergency on Sunday where the analysis suggested about a 20 minutes response time, and there were some criticisms of that. So Commissioner Hartung asked me to review that particular call. So I've asked Chief Cameron to come up. It was a medical call, and also Adam Hines is here from REMSA in the event that the board has any specific questions about it. But
Okay.
nevertheless, I'll turn it over to Chief Cameron.
Good morning. For the record, Joe Cameron, Division Chief, Truckee Meadows. When Chief Moore asked me to pull the data on this report, what I was able to find was the fire RMS narrative that we pulled, the fire report. I was able to find the CAD data. We do not have a patient care report, or an EPCR record as we call it, due to the fact that we were not making patient contact on scene. So any questions regarding the dispatch side of it, I have Adam Hines here, Communications Director from REMSA. He'll be able to answer that question. From our perspective, though, once I pulled the data, we did show that Engine 13 was dispatched to this call at 16:48 hours on Sunday. They responded from Station 18, so I think that's kind of note that they were doing required training up there. District 18, not Station 13. They responded what we call a priority response, which is lights and sirens, due to the priority 1 dispatching for this patient. Immediately, about 1 minute after they went into service, care flight was put on a go due to the location of this and the priority 1 status for the patient. At 16:55, while our crews were en route, REMSA did advise that there was a change in the patient condition. The acuity had been downgraded. It was no longer a priority 1 response. At that point, care flight was canceled. We didn't need care flight for the priority 3 response. Engine 13 did continue to this call in a non-priority response mode, so they were not going lights and sirens. They were simply normal drive time from the area that they were at all the way to the scene. When they did arrive on scene, REMSA was already on scene with the patient approximately 6 minutes before that. When our crews showed up on scene, REMSA was coming outside and said that they were canceled and weren't needed on the scene. So I think looking at the drive time, since that's being called into question, we did pull some GIS mapping from the location that they were responding to, and for a non-priority response, I drove it myself. It is right within what the GIS mapping estimates put the response time from the location that they responded to. So probably of note is once these calls get downgraded to priority 3, it is pretty common in this area in the valley to have fire departments not respond. A lot of times they cancel on priority 3 responses. Engine 13 did not cancel. They decided, per our policy, they're going to continue onto the scene in case there is a change in patient condition, or if the REMSA unit gets diverted to another higher priority call. We did have somebody on scene. So they continued their response. REMSA did beat them there, and they weren't needed once they arrived on scene. So if you guys have any questions.
Commissioner Hartung, have things? This is just information. Okay. All right, thank you very much.
Okay.
Appreciate the information. Good job.
Good morning, Adam Hines, Director of Communications for REMSA. I'm available. I can either go through at least our side of the EMD and how we got that determinant as far as a non-priority determinant, if you wish, or I can answer any other questions.
Yes, and the transport time to the hospital based on the priority.
Yeah. So the call was received by REMSA Communications, and the information we were provided, and without, with protecting patient privacy, but just generally we received an inquiry about a patient that was a pediatric patient who had a fever, or described to have a fever, and had been described to have a seizure. Within 14 seconds, our closest unit was assigned and was responding. Actually, interestingly, that unit was at the intersection of Stead and Silver Lake. They were covering that area. And about a minute before, they were posted to Lemon Valley based on our demand analysis that suggested that we needed to move them to cover Lemon Valley. So they were actually en route to Lemon Valley. When they got the call, they were almost to the intersection of Stead and 395. They received that call. We began responding emergent lights and sirens priority 1 because the information was that there was a child having a seizure. Our medically trained dispatcher went through, and obviously the caller was very distraught, very upset, understandably, and so it took some time to get the questions. And the questions that they ask are, is the patient breathing? Is the patient awake? Have they had more than one seizure in a row? Do they have a history of brain tumor or stroke? Are they diabetic? Is the jerking stopped yet? This information is how we stratify our responses, because obviously if the patient's still seizing, we're going to continue to respond emergent. If the patient's not seizing and they're breathing normally, that response criteria is a little bit different. And that's what we, through that interrogation, we deduced is the patient was no longer seizing, did not have a history suggestive of a brain tumor or anything, was breathing effectively, and so our dispatcher actually goes through a breathing diagnostic tool that has the person provide us every time the patient breathes. So we can see if it's an effective rate, and that was done. And that's how we got to a determinant, which is what we call an alpha level determinant, which is in this area is a priority 3 non-lights and sirens response. So we responded emergent. Once we got that information, we downgraded our crews. We provided that information to our co-response partners at Washoe for Truckee Meadows so that they could not respond lights and sirens, which is a risk to everybody when we're doing that. Paramedics arrived on scene. And they treated the patient en route to the hospital. They provided monitoring. There was no intervention that was provided. By the time they got to the hospital, the patient was awake and age appropriate. So that was it. Anything else I can answer?
Good. Thank you very much. I appreciate
Appreciate it.
you
Thank you.
being here today. Chief, anything else?
Yes, Madam Chair, just a few updates. Item A.1, demonstration of station location software. Time slipped away. I wasn't able to get the demonstration of what our new software can do for you, so I'll defer that to next month. But I did go to Oregon for a training, and it is very, very powerful. We're able to monitor and simulate new locations for stations in the event that we want to move one. We can study response time analysis. We can do absolutely everything that you could possibly imagine. I can tell you the average response times in your districts. I can tell you just about anything that we do in an emergency response fashion. So I'll have a little more time to bring that to you in May, and I'm sorry I don't have it ready.
Good.
An update on the Tumwa Fire Hydrant Maintenance Agreement that is in progress. I've given a draft copy to Tumwa. They're working on it on their end. They believe it may not be ready until June, so they need time to study it, but it is in progress. AVL dispatching update. We've had a couple of mutual aid requests to the city of Reno, and we're still noticing that it's taking sometimes 5 to 6 minutes for that call to be transferred, and across both jurisdictions. So when Reno calls us, we call Reno. It's taking about 5 to 6 minutes to launch the mutual aid partner. This manifested yesterday in a report of a structure fire in District 35's area, where the engine actually arrived on the scene before Reno actually came out the door. So I mention this simply because AVL is just absolutely critical for us to improve services in the district. So I understand the city of Reno has obtained $10,000 from the E911 board to get some funds to do what they need to do to get AVL working on their side. They have said that they want to launch AVL for their jurisdiction and work out the bugs. And the reason for that is that Tiburon resides on City of Reno servers. So they're going to manipulate the AVL protocols, make sure that it works, and then I think the next step will be to pass that on to Washoe County and also to the City of Sparks. So I don't know how long that will take, but nevertheless, it certainly we're making some steps forward in that. Open burning update. I'm probably going to, not probably, I am going to close open burning this weekend. We'll have a little more moisture perhaps Wednesday and Thursday, but we'll start getting into dry periods. We had some 763 burn permits issued, and probably a number of citizens who don't bother with burn permits. Nevertheless, we had a safe open burning period, and I'm happy to see people take steps to reduce their green waste. So after the burn period closes, then we'll concentrate on green waste recycling like we did last fall. We'll do that in early spring, and then again in late fall. It's not very likely we'll open up open burning again in the fall, simply because we typically don't have a wet fall until after October 31st, and after October 31st, health district regulations preclude open burning for air pollution reasons. So a good, successful season on that. Cindy Vance and I met with our counterparts at Sierra County to talk about the service agreement to Sierra County, California. We had a very, very positive meeting, and I expect that we'll have something to present to the board in June. And we are working on some new arrangements, redefining the service area, and also we're talking a lot about costs. And so very, very positive meeting, and I think I'm hopeful that you'll be pleased with the outcome.
Okay.
Finally, 8B are district statistics. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them, but otherwise I'll let the report stand.
Okay. Commissioner Lucy?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Chief, couple things. I had an individual from Hidden Valley call me, and I think it was an error on the constituent's behalf, but can you just explain for everybody, and so we can put on the public record, how big of property do you need to have to obtain a open burning permit? How large of a piece do we require through the Truckee Meadows Fire Protection District?
Commissioner Lucy, I'm asking for at least a half an acre.
Okay, at least a half acre, and that has been a rule of ours for how long now?
We have tried, well, just this season. I've been very, very concerned about the number of pile burns that have escaped. Last season it was 12, and I'm getting increasingly uncomfortable with escaped fires. My belief is the half acre is a standard lot in most subdivisions, and the alternative, if you don't have a big enough lot, that you bring it to us for recycling. My concern is if it's not at least a half an acre, the lot is so small that if it escapes, it potentially gets to your neighbor's property in quick fashion. Nevertheless, I've allowed people to talk to me about an exemption from that, and I've had a couple people call and ask for an exemption.
Okay.
And so I'm, of course, reasonable in that, but that is generally the criteria, is a half an acre.
Okay. And I appreciate that. The constituent that I spoke with was frustrated because he has a third of an acre and he's been receiving a permit, and this year didn't receive a permit because, for whatever reason, they just denied because his lot wasn't big enough. Was the reasoning according to what he told me. But I'd like to reiterate what you just said. I think I agree. I believe that it's important that we have at least a minimum of a half an acre. I look at some of the properties in District 2, specifically around the Arrow Creek, Saddlehorn, Callahan Ranch, Hidden Valley area that have less than a half acre. Even half acre lots are tremendously close. And to these homes and some of these subdivisions, and I worry exactly. Sunday we had quite a wind event. We had a couple of wind events prior last week. Those are very easily that someone could get out there. They start a fire in the morning, start buying whatever piles they may have based upon it, and not pay attention to that, and the wind picks up, and we have another major issue. So, I appreciate that it is a very useful tool for a lot of residents, especially a lot of residents in District 2, to have those burn permits. And I don't want to see them go away. I just want to make sure that we're doing everything we can to either communicate with our citizens when they go apply for a burn permit that they have adequate water, adequate space, and defensible area for the neighbors, because like you said, number of fires that started in Washoe Valley and Pleasant Valley were because of burn bins that weren't properly attended to. And I think there's some challenges to that. So I just thank you for that update on that. And then one other thing, Madam Chair, if I may, I'm looking at your chief's report here in regards to call volume. Once again, we're looking at this February, we saw 799 incidents total for the month. And the Northern Battalion, which is 5 stations, Station 15, 17, 13, 18, and 35, represented 592 of those calls. And then the Southern Battalion, which would be the Station 14, 37, 16, 36, 39, and 30, which are all within, the Southern Battalion, which are all within District 2, south of McCarran, aside from Hidden Valley, only saw 187 calls. And I had asked for this, and I was looking at my, our request for updates in regards to the CIP and expansions for stations 15 and 17 back in December. I'd like to get an update, more, because we're looking at, we saw 165 calls for EMS calls out of Station 15 in Sun Valley. We saw 127 calls out of Spanish Springs, and then coming in third would be, Station 13 out of Stead with 61 calls. We're seeing a ton of EMS for three stations that represent a good majority of, between 15, 17, and 13, a good majority of our calls. Over a third of our calls come from those three stations for the entire district, almost a half. And it's frustrating to me that we don't have more resources up there. And it's not my district, but I'm concerned. I'm concerned for those residents up north. I'm concerned because we are continuing to grow north. We're continuing to talk about expansion in these areas. And I want to make sure that we're properly suited to make sure that capital improvement is in place now as we talk about development and infrastructure going in up north, because this is frightening to me that we only have three, and then that's what that's really doing is pulling a lot of resources out of the southern to cover. And so we need to either start changing or addressing that in a different manner, because it is definitely not even for the amount of stations. For 5 stations to the north and 5 stations, they're not seeing half and half in calls. So I'd like to see some kind of a plan and expedited from you in regards to, based upon these call volumes. And it hasn't changed from month to month when we look at this report. So if I can get an update on where we are with that CIP expansion plan that I asked for back in December, that would be beneficial. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Lucy. Commissioner Hartung, and then Chief Moore.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I can certainly acquiesce to Chief and yield the time if you want to respond.
Thank you, Commissioner Lucy. The simulation software on the stations that I spoke of just a moment ago, a simulation we ran on 2016 data showed that the one area where we have response times in excess of 10 minutes is in the Silver Knolls in the Lemon Valley area. And the reason for that is that Station 13 is in the city of Reno and surrounded by a good portion of the city of Reno. And so when we have a call to Silver Knolls, we have to take the westerly path. In the Lemon Valley, we take an easterly path. And so that station is split. One of the things we're talking about on a staff level right now and on a planning level, and we'll introduce this in a later agenda item on the budget, is in that particular area, response times are high simply because it's split by a valley. So what we're thinking about is perhaps taking Station 13 and making Station 221, which is a current volunteer station, a career station in the future, particularly when we're starting to see development being talked about in Silver Knolls that could be about 2,000 units. I've had a conversation with Bob Listner about expanding that station to potentially make it a career station. And then also taking resources and putting them in Lemon Valley and making that volunteer station a career station in the future. So whether that takes 2 or 3 years or 4 years, that's really where we're seeing a great need, is to add additional resources in the north, but particularly put them where we're having a lot of calls where the response time is beyond our standards of cover. And we're also going to do some things in the budget that we'll explain momentarily about strengthening resources at Station 15.
Good, thank you, Chief. Good information. Commissioner Hartung.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Commissioner Lucy. just to piggyback on that, that was one of the things that I certainly wanted to have a conversation with the board about. But I think the solution lies in what I keep referring to as flex crews or rescues, and I think that rescue can take a lot of call volume off of our engines. And I'd love to see a rescue at 221 in Lemon Valley, and I'd love to see one, of course, either at 15 or 17, that can work between those two stations. And I think that would initially give us some great coverage. So I think that there's some real merit there, just because it is medical in nature, and it doesn't require the response of an engine. It requires the response of medical personnel. The other thing, I'd like to go back, Chief, on the question of a half an acre. Is that the physical size or is that an average size? Because we have subdivisions that'll say we're average half an acre, and I'll give you this example, Commissioner Lucy. We had to overturn a request. A resident of yours in the Virginia foothills wanted a mini horse, but they wouldn't allow it because it was 0.49 of an acre. And they're supposed to have a half an acre, the minimum size for a horse. And so it was supposed to be a half an acre, but when they did the lots and the roads and all of that, when they subdivided everything, it just came out that there were a few lots slightly less than a half an acre. So I'm wondering how we go about that. Is it a physical size or is it an average size?
I would say it's an average size,
Okay.
size, Commissioner, and to be perfectly honest, that number is arbitrary.
Okay.
And it's my best guess at what is a reasonable size, so that if the fire escapes, that the homeowner would still have enough time and enough area between his neighbor to take some action and give us a little time to respond.
Sure.
I did have a citizen call to say, I'm not quite a half an acre, may still have permission to do it.
Right.
And he talked to me about the resources that he had. I felt comfortable in saying yes. So we do want to be responsible and reasonable to people who may not be exactly a half an acre and have that conversation with them. I understand that this gentleman that protested was pretty irate, but nevertheless, a simple conversation with me, and perhaps we would stop by to see what it is he wants to burn. I want to get to yes for the citizens and not just be completely bound by a half an acre.
Sure.
So that really is the reason why.
Okay, I just wanted to try to understand that. I'd also like to thank you, Chief, for working with TUMWA on the fire hydrant maintenance. That's something we've been working on for a long time. It'll be a great savings to the district. And by the way, it's good because then TUMWA also knows that their system has been worked on properly, and they're the experts. And so that's always a good direction. And then, Chief, my last and final thing would actually, for next month or in the near future, can we get a photo demo of the training equipment that's at Station 17? We have an amazing piece of equipment that's stored by Station 17 right next to it on our open lot. That's a piece of training equipment that I think the board will just find really, really interesting. I was made aware of it when I stopped by several weeks ago, but it's a really neat piece of equipment, and I'm not sure that the board has ever seen this, and it's a pretty amazing gadget. Does all kinds of things. It slices, dices, chops, it peels. It truly does. And then, Chief, thank you for the report, the response time, and thank you to REMSA for the response time report and understanding that. I will just tell you, no one knows better about having an extremely sick child and having to take that child to the hospital myself on more than one occasion. And the physicians, not just to the ER, but her group of physicians met her there because we were that close to a death scenario. I get it. I get response times. And in fact, at one point, the physician asked me, is it faster for you to drive her or is it faster to call an ambulance? And I said, it's faster for me to drive you. He said, go now, do not pack a bag, I will be there. I get it. I get it. So thank you, Chief. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Commissioner Hartung. Commissioner Lucy?
Thank you, Madam Chair. One thing I just wanted to add, and I agree with the arbitrary number of the burn permits. Specifically, there are some lots, just for example, in Saddlehorn, that are really narrow, very, very long lots that are acre wide, but they're not more than 120 feet in width, and so if our people are applying, how hard is it, Chief, for us to send out, for example, 36 is in Arrow Creek Station, and that satisfies a number, that Saddlehorn, Field Creek area. How easy, if someone were to apply that was in the unincorporated county that has that, isn't within a HOA or whatever, can go and look and say, this is our staff report, or this is our staff opinion based upon this lot and what this individual. Are you doing that, or is our fire prevention specialist doing that? Who's doing that? Who's going and actually visually taking a look at these lots and these properties to make sure that because it's what it sounds like to me is that they're applying online or they're applying at the fire station, but we're not really putting eyes on the property to evaluate the necessity of those burn permits. And I want to make sure that we're not just allowing that to go arbitrarily. You look on assessor's map, oh yeah, it looks all right. I think that's a little too arbitrary. I think we need to have a little bit more eyes on if we have the staff availability. Can you speak to that really quick?
Certainly. Thank you, Commissioner Lucy. With over almost 800 burn permits, we really don't have the time to go and look at every lot. I think where I want to head with the smaller lots is for citizens to use the green waste recycling program and figure out a way where we have a seasonal hand crew that can actually go door to door and pick up if necessary. What really concerns me is the small lots where if the fire does get away, and they do, even with the best intentions of the homeowner, that we're going to see a fire that will propagate from home to home and have a disaster. So we need to continue to have conversations about the minimum lot size, but it becomes very, very difficult for us to inspect each and every lot. We depend on the common sense and the attitude for safety of our citizens to make sure that the thing's going to be properly watched. And unfortunately, that's never a system that's 100%. So there's always risk. There's always inherent risk with people doing open burning. Nevertheless, I understand that it's difficult to get rid of all of that green waste. You fill up a 90-gallon can several times over in the spring. So given time, again, we want to move away from open burning except for ranch properties and for large lots. And for smaller lots, we want to emphasize green waste recycling. So a step at a time, I think over time, what I hope to do is eliminate open burning on small lots altogether.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Lucy. Anything else, Chief? Oh, wait a minute. Vice Chair Jung?
Thank you. And as the chair of the District Board of Health, I thank you for that. Our open burning does not help us with our EPA attainment levels, especially in the Washoe Valley, which is a trap, as we all know, that bowl down there. So that's just good climate science and good maintenance of our very fragile air quality here that we are always on the brink of not attaining through the EPA. So I think that is a great path to go. This being able to burn because you own your own property days are over, because it's just not healthy and it's a risk, and it is something that should be reserved to very large lots in rural areas, not in the density like Commissioner Lucy was saying about Saddlehorn. And then even looking at it from an assessor's map, you don't know what kind of trees they have now, what kind of junk they have around there, anything flammable that could be around there. So I like that direction that you're going. And we can't afford to send somebody out to evaluate everybody's lot who would like to open burn unless we want to start charging them a fee for inspection. So thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Jung. Chief, anything else on your report?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I wanted to add one more piece of information to the fact record on the response time complaint. Commissioner Hartung had asked me to measure the delta between where the engine responded from to where it would have, the response time from Station 13 had it been in quarters. And that was somewhere around 6 minutes of additional response time. But we do know that REMSA arrived 6 minutes before us. So in fact, there really wasn't any degradation of the response time, that even had we been in quarters, we would have arrived at the same time as REMSA in that particular call. It is a very, very scary thing to have a seizure in your child, and I understand the emotions surrounding that, but nevertheless, REMSA's EMD process is very, very good, and it was able to determine that it was not a life-threatening situation, and had we determined it was, you know, we might have called Reno, whose station wasn't too far away, to respond to that, but the reason why we didn't is simply it's a priority 3, and it's not a life-threatening situation at that point when we get that information.
Okay, thank you, Chief. Anything else?
No, ma'am.
Okay, that's the end of Chief's report. Let's go to number 9, Chief.
Item 9 is approve the purchase of 2 new Type 1 structure engines from Superior Equipment, 7285 South 700 West, Midvale, Utah, in an amount of $1,244,228.84 using the NPPR Gov Fire Rescue GPO program as allowed by NRS 332.195. This is part of our own ongoing capital acquisition. We're replacing and adding 2 new fire engines, really as simple as that. These are structural engines, not brush engines. And instead of buying 1 engine every year as we had previously proposed, we're actually going to buy 2 every 2 years, which just makes it a more efficient process for us.
Okay, good. Commissioner Hartung?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So one's a ladder truck, Chief?
No, sir. We've deferred the ladder truck to a future date. We have in our budget presentation repurpose in that particular piece of equipment. We still intend to acquire a ladder truck, but in talking to Chief Gorgon, we want some time before we study exactly what we're going to buy, how we're going to staff it, where it's going to be positioned, how it will be used. So we just think we have more study to do before we spend about $1.4 million on a ladder truck.
Yes. Yeah, I think the only station we have currently is 15 that'll handle one, isn't it?
15 and the new 14 are the only 2 stations that can accommodate a ladder right now.
Okay, good. Motion to approve, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Okay. Do I have any public comment? Seeing none. We have a motion to approve and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Please cast your vote on the screen and then affirm your vote up above. Okay. Motion carries 5-0 with all commissioners present. Thank you. Chief.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Item 10 is presentation, discussion, and possible direction to staff on the fiscal year 2018-19 budget for Truckee Meadows Fire Protection District. Cindy Vance is going to give you an overview of the budget financials and service level improvements. I'll talk a little bit about planning initiatives. This is just a very high flight over what you'll see in the budget document coming to you next month. So we're going to go through this rather quickly.
Okay.
Good morning, Commissioners. Cindy Vance, Chief Fiscal Officer for the record. As you're aware, we filed the tentative budget, which is due on April 15th, and then we come back in May to have the hearing on that budget with any changes to be adopted as the final. This review is what we did file for the tentative budget with the state. We have our 6 funds, active funds. There'll be 7 presented in the budget because we have to present the health benefits internal service fund, but it's been closed. It just has a 0 budget. Our current general fund revenues are estimated at $29 million with operating expenses at also $29 million. So we've kind of reached that point where our expenses and our revenues are fairly equal. Property taxes in those revenues are anticipated to be about 7.4% larger than the current projection for the current year. And CTX is actually projected to be about 6.5% over the current year projections, but that is being offset by a refund to a tax entity that's fairly significant that we've had little information from the state on the exact amount and how long that will be reduce our CTX. So there is a significant estimate just for conservative natures to offset that. That's included, that reduces to that 29 million. Our capital projects fund is funded by transfers. Current year, we do not have any, for fiscal year 19, we do not have any budgeted transfers from the general fund, but we are rolling over a beginning fund balance of about 4.9 million in revenues. Beginning fund balance, and then $10,000 of investment revenues estimated, with expenses at 4.6, and we'll go over a little bit more detail on some of those projected expenses. Our special revenue funds include the emergency fund, sick and annual comp benefits fund, and stabilization funds. Those funds are budgeted for worst-case scenarios, so with small revenues and large expenses. Emergency fund, again, just minimal revenues of $300,000 with expenses of approximately 1.4 to deal with a worst-case scenario. That has been fairly consistently replenished with reimbursements either through the Wildlife Protection Plan or other entities that we're assisting. Sick and annual comp benefits fund is when we do have large payouts for employees that leave the district. We do budget for up to $725,000. We have paid out about $100,000 in the current year. Goodness, project. Stabilization fund is for unforeseen drops in revenues, so it does get some minimal investment income, and we budget for high expenses at $500,000. That's been pretty static. Our last fund, our Turtle Service Fund, is our workers' compensation fund. Originally, for the current year, we had budgeted a transfer to kind of close that down. However, since we've been receiving the invoices from the city of Reno related to the heart and lung claims, we have decided to leave those funds in the internal service fund and not precipitate the close of that fund until we get a better understanding of exactly where the expenses are running. Based on the current invoices, we have budgeted for about $507,000 for expenses. Okay. This is a look at our general fund with our revenues at 27.9 million. For the current projection, our total expenditures are projecting to end at about 26.7, leaving us a operating surplus of 1.1. Our financing sources, this includes our transfers to the 100,000 to the sick and annual, plus the 4.3 million that we transferred to the capital projects funds during the current year. Leaves us with a ending fund balance of 6.85 million, based on a actual beginning fund balance of 10.1. Again, that rolls over into the next year, and for the current year, budget year of fiscal year 19, again, about 29 million in revenues and expenditures, gives us an operating surplus of about 229,000. The other financing sources is just the contingency amount, which does leave us with a slight deficit at this time. However, our current year is looking like it's a larger beginning fund balance coming into 19 than originally budgeted. And that should leave us with a ending fund balance of about 6.8 million, which is about 23% of current year expenditures. So that's a good position to be in. The one thing we are still in is in negotiations. So we anticipate a change when we can bring back the updated tentative to be adopted to the final in May. This chart just gives a picture of our general fund expenses, showing that our major expense, of course, is salaries, and then benefits being second, with service and supplies third. Salaries and benefits do equate to about 80.9% of our expenditures. The service level improvements that we've included in the budget is that fourth person at Station 35. The additional two persons, individuals at Station 15 to be on the either rescue or tender. A fuels management specialist position, and this person will be used to develop and enhance our comprehensive fuels reduction projects. For our capital, there are the 2 new structural engines that are just approved. Those will actually be encumbered out of the current year budget, but we don't expect to expend it until fiscal year 19 when we receive the engines. And then, actually, I'm sorry, actually, that will come out of the current year budget because we did, under that contract, there's a large prepaid discount, so we intend to take advantage of that. The 2 new water tenders are the final, is a buildup of water tenders, and that will be encumbered in the current year budget, but not finished until fiscal year 19. And in the fiscal year 19 budget also includes 2 new command vehicles and 1 new air light vehicle, and then others to be developed per our discussions here and with the chief for the final tentative. And for the planning initiatives, I'll pass it over to the chief.
So we'd like to use the next fiscal year as a planning year and take a significant amount of staff time to plan our future. So revising the strategic plan is something we want to involve the community in, as well as the board, and have conversations about how we're doing and what services the city would like, our citizens would like to see enhanced. Station location study, we'll be using the software to predict where we're going to need new stations. Facility master plan that Commissioner Lucy asked for, we're well underway in getting that done. 10-year vehicle acquisition plan, we have a pretty good handle on what we're going to need to replace, but again, future acquisitions will include a ladder truck and additional engines for future stations. Ongoing succession planning, I think we're going to continue the Captain's Academy, but I think that there are staff members that I'd like to see developed to be chief officers and eventually division chiefs and deputy chiefs and perhaps even me. We have a lot of talent in our organization, and it's my intent in the next few years to develop that talent and position those staff members to be viable candidates to assume the leadership of the department in the next 5 or 6 years. Station 37 relocation study. I previously reported to the board that our SUP expired in 18, but I actually found out it doesn't expire until 2021. But we were looking at a site to relocate that station and found out that it is in a floodplain, which we could mitigate the 100-year floodplain, but we can't mitigate the 500-year floodplain there. So we're actively looking again for a new site for Station 37, and when we can find it, we have some money budgeted to acquire the land and begin the architecture for moving that station. That station, again, is just a modular, and the truck bay is very, very small, such that we only have 1 structural engine that will actually fit in that bay. So that's why that station is a priority for us. And then I spoke to splitting Station 13 to Silver Lake and Lemon Valley. We want to understand the costs. We want to present to the board what that means in terms of response time and service level improvements, and engage the citizens in that, and just confirm that that's actually a good idea and that's a direction that the board would like to move forward.
Okay, good.
So we believe that the budget that we have prepared does provide for financial stability, and it really does focus on the critical capital and mission critical staffing. So,
Thank you, Vice Chair Jung. Thank you very much for the presentation. Very interesting. Thank you, Chief. This is going to be an interesting budget year for all of us, I think. Yes, Ms. Vice Chair Jung?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Do we have a policy for this Board of Commissioners as to what the minimum ending fund balance should be for our budget?
we would like to at least have 20%, but I don't know if there's an actual written policy.
I believe that the
20%.
board has expressed previously to be above 20%, but I'd have to go back and look at the record, Commissioner, to
Okay, and let's talk about that a little bit too offline. The other question I have for you is, so this land in Hidden Valley that isn't 500-year flood proof, we would sell that land?
It's actually owned by the county, and the existing station's in the floodplain, believe it or not. The site that we're looking for was county-owned, and the deal I was trying to strike with the county is that we'll give you the modulars that we currently own in exchange for being able to build a station on a county parcel, which really doesn't have much of value to do anything. But we did a geotechnical study, and we can't get out of the 500-year floodplain. We can mitigate the 100. So the concern is from the county engineer that FEMA requires critical infrastructure not to be in any floodplain. So that site's looking a little more difficult.
But so that's not a TM property, that's a county property that we could sell once we get rid of our non-paying renter. Right?
I'm not sure that you could sell it for the reason that it's zoned in a particular way, but I'm not the expert on that. So
Sure, or turn it into open space, or,
it currently is open space.
right.
But
Okay.
we are looking at a parcel in the southern end of Hidden Valley because we have such a great relationship with the city of Sparks. They're actually very, very close to the north end of Hidden Valley, and if we position ourselves in the southern end, we actually think through that relationship with Sparks, we could serve Hidden Valley perhaps better than we're serving it now.
Good. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman.
Thank you, Vice Chair Jung. Commissioner Hartung?
Yes, and just, Chief, I think that's great planning. Once the Southeast Connector gets opened up, it'll really change Sparks. Which is Sparks Station right there at the end? Is that like 3?
I think it's 3.
Yeah. Sparks Station 3 is right at the end of the Southeast Connector. So it's a straight shot into Hidden Valley. So it's I think that a lot of things will end up changing once the Southeast Connector opens. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Hartung. Anything else, Chief?
No, Madam Chair.
All right. Do we have any public comment? I see none listed. Okay. We have no public comment. So do we need a motion to approve this? What do we need? Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, please cast your vote when it comes up on the screen. And please affirm your vote on the upper screen. Motion passes 5-0 with all commissioners present. Thank you, Chief, and we will move on.
Item 11 is possible closed session. Madam Chair, we do not need a closed session today.
Okay.
Item 12 is Commissioner Fire Chief's announcements. I have no additional announcements, Madam Chair.
Okay, commissioners, anybody have anything else? Okay, we will close that and move on to final public comment, Chief.
Final public comment, Madam Clerk. Is there any public comment?
I have Ms. Tammy Holdstill signed in. Good morning.
Good morning. Tammy Hillsdale, Lemon Valley Swan Lake Recovery Committee. I'd like to thank Chief Moore for starting to think ahead of the game instead of behind the game, even though Washoe County is behind the game and behind the 8 ball regarding closed basins and fire response and emergency response when Lemon Drive is closed. 20 minutes to get to a citizen who is in dire need is appalling and it's not appreciated in any way, shape, or form. It is the county's responsibility to have had that road taken care of so that the response could have been faster. And that is not Chief's fault, that is the county's fault. And we'll lay blame exactly where it should be. As far as development goes, if the county were paying attention to the needs of the people to begin with when they were developing, Chief Moore would have been able to put things where they needed to be prior to saying, oh my God, we're not getting the right responses. It has to do with starting from development all the way through. That's called infrastructure. And that needs to be looked at and addressed before any planning commission approves any project without getting written approval from the chief. So, thank you.
Thank you. I see no more public comment, so we will, I'm sorry? So I will close sorry, my tongue doesn't seem to be working today. I will close public comment and bring it back to the board, and we are adjourned. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take about a 10-minute break, and then, so we will start the BCC meeting at 10:15.